it's a time machine. And I would rather have a boat too for enjoyment. You can still have business meetings on boats. And like you said, you would use it more. So when people, they don't go hang out in the airplane. Like we don't hang out in the jet. I get the jet ready for them. They show up. Boom, we blast off. Literally family vacations or business deals. That's it. That's the two uses. Where a boat, there's so many more uses for it, and you get enjoyment. I don't think these people get enjoyment out of their jet. It's a tool. It's their car. It's literally their Uber. I tell people I'm an Uber driver for billionaires.
All right, guys, welcome to another episode of The Report. Today, we are hanging in the studio, and I don't know how, but it is the start of Q4. We are officially in October, and next month is going to be Thanksgiving, and then it's going to be Christmas and New Year. Before we know it, this year is flying by. But I am super excited today because I got a guest, might be the most interesting man that I know. He does a little bit of this, a little bit of that. He is a pilot and a real estate investor and doing a bunch of cool stuff on the side. I got my man, Curt Marker. Curt, welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, thanks for having me, Rich.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming, dude. I appreciate you coming down. Quick little hop, 30-minute drive down the 5 freeway from Oceanside, man. Dude, I got to ask you, man. I've always been curious. You've been flying for 15 years now, doing a lot of crazy stuff, dude. What is the most crazy flying experience or story that you have?
Man, craziest story is probably like dealing with almost in-flight emergencies with mechanical failures in private jets,
What's the craziest emergency you've encountered?
I've had quite a few, but I would say I was coming back from Cabo. It's 10 p.m. at night. I drop a client off for a fishing tournament in Cabo. We take off, so there's no passengers. And at 40,000 feet, I had a depressurization issue, which means oxygen mask drop in the back. All the alarms and bells are going off.
And it's just you and one other pilot?
It's me and the co-pilot. And we had to throw oxygen masks on, an emergency descent down to 10,000 feet at night over mountain area.
In Mexican airspace.
Yeah. So we start descending down, and I tell the co-pilot, you're kind of yelling. It's pretty loud in the cockpit when you're going that fast down. And so the cabin's just increasing, so you have to be able to breathe through the oxygen mask. And he's reading the checklist, and it's nothing we did. It was a computer failure. But you still, you got to get down to the 10,000 feet where you can breathe normal air. And we got down. I knew there was mountains in the area, so I went down to 15,000, found the mountains on the radar, and got us in a better heading over the water. Down to 10,000, took the oxygen mask off, and slowed the airplane down, just slowed the whole scenario down.
Because it's Mexican airspace is a part of it, because I was an air traffic controller for many years, and so the charts here in the U.S., we know, relatively speaking, you can trust them. But because it's Mexican airspace, were you thinking like, hey, like we got to maybe have a little buffer in here?
Yeah, I mean, they have the mountains on the charts, but you're not always flying with the chart like sitting in your hand. When you're cruising, we have radar up, which also has terrain, but we're not flying with the chart with the iPad of where the mountains are. I know down in South Cabo, there's mountains in the area. So the first indication was like, let's get out over the water, over the bay there, was my first thought, So, yeah, I mean, you almost can't trust air traffic controllers in Mexico as well, actually. In the U.S., you totally can.
Wow, I mean, that's a stretch.
You would know better,
That's a stretch. And you can't always trust the air traffic controllers in the U.S. I can tell you that firsthand. You'd be surprised by what I've seen work in that industry for 11 years. But that said, how did this emergency end?
So it ended, we got to 10,000 feet. We followed a checklist, which Gulfstream puts out on that airplane, and it tells you to pull a circuit breaker and basically get rid of one of these computers that's giving you bad info that failed. So after going through all the steps, then the airplane was reading correctly, and we were able to climb back up. My first indication was go back to Cabo. But now you're in international airspace. You can do it because it's an emergency. But now when your plane is recovered, it's not fully an emergency. You're like, well, we're stable now. We're at 10,000 feet.
Worst case scenario, you can cruise all the way back to San Diego at 10,000 feet.
And so you're right. So we had extra gas, and we ended up going to Yuma to clear customs is where we're headed. And we made it to Yuma, and then we got the airplane back to Chino where it was based. So that was one of the crazy ones where it's like you have to act immediately. You don't have very much time,
Yeah. What about the closest call that you've ever had where you thought, oh man, I might not survive this one, or maybe it was a near midair or anything like that?
I could say I haven't had too many of those, thank God. I had one though in Oceanside. There's a skydiving company there. I was flying for United Express in a turboprop at the time, coming into Carlsbad, and I mean, We came pretty close within a skydiving airplane because they don't fly normally.
Yeah,
They're not out
they're
cruising.
dangerous.
They are coming straight down like 3,000 feet a minute, and we get an indication saying pull up or turn right. And we did that, but I mean, the airplane was 100 feet away, which is way too close. Like 100 feet feels like 2 feet in the air in an airplane. That was the closest call.
Dude, talk about jump planes, man. Those jump operations are like probably one of the most dangerous things I encountered as a air traffic controller. I had an incident with a jump plane out in Las Vegas. I was working LA Center with, I think it was Mesquite Airport, 67 Lima, I believe it is. But anyways, they have a jump zone. This is about 40 miles north of Vegas, and they just go up 12,000 feet, and then they report 2 minutes prior to jumpers away, and then we'll make a call on the radio. And it goes something like, hey, like parachute jumping conducting in the vicinity of this airport, 12,000 and below, use caution. And there might be some VFRs. Basically, I'll scan to make sure there's no VFRs or anyone going through the jump zone when they throw them out. And there was like a bunch of aircraft below that were like just squawking 1,200, not talking to us, below the jump zone. And so I said, hey, hold your jumpers until advised. And they held for like 5 minutes, but there was still like more traffic coming. And I wasn't talking to any of them. And then they just said, hey, we're jumpers away. And the guy was kind of skittish with his voice, and they start descending after jumpers away. And turns out he ran out of fuel on the way down, because these guys probably only take off with minimum fuel just to get up, because they want to maximize the amount of passengers or the jumpers they can bring on. And sure enough, I get pulled out of the seat after my session, and they're like, hey, like this guy crashed. They pulled me out to do drug testing and all that sort of thing. He crashed into a golf course. And they pulled the tapes and everything, but yeah, it was on him. He took off with not enough fuel, and I thought something was odd when he was like, "Hey, we're jumpers away." Anyways, knowing that there was traffic in between the jumpers on their way down, he just threw them out anyways because he knew he was about to run out of fuel. And I could hear in his voice it was a little bit skittish. And next thing you know, the plane had cartwheeled in the golf course, and it was like in the news and everything. But luckily, guy went to the hospital. He was okay. Everyone was fine. No harm, no foul, and hopefully they had good insurance for the aircraft.
Yeah, that's a wild story. I actually, one of my first pilot jobs, I interviewed or did a test flight in Oceanside for a skydiving job. And he said, hey, bring a friend if he wants to go skydiving. So I brought a friend, Josh, and this chief pilot sits in the right seat, kind of teaches you how to fly this Cessna 206.
Yeah.
Same thing you're talking about. The whole thing was sketchy. It may be legal, but you take off and we're, announcing, hey, we're going to have a jumper out. And SoCal's saying, no, don't go now. There's 3 airplanes coming under you. And I look back, and the jump instructor who had my buddy on his back goes, nope, we're not waiting. And they just go.
Oh, fuck.
And now I'm going, my best friend is like falling out of the sky. And SoCal told me no. And then now the guy's like, hey, you need to descend down fast to conserve fuel. And so we started doing that. The whole thing was just a shit show. We landed. My buddy Josh was safe. And I'm like, never again. So I never flew a skydive airplane ever again.
That's so funny, man. It's not funny, but it's ironic that it sounds like all these jump companies are trying to conserve fuel to the point where it's almost like risking a little bit of safety. This other jump zone, when I got to SoCal approach, is actually, the fun fact, the busiest jump zone in the entire U.S. And it's right here, not Lake Elsinore. We would work 2 jump zones, one sector. One was Lake Elsinore, which was pretty busy. They would have multiple aircraft going up and down, but it was Paris Valley. And Paris Valley, dude, on like weekends, this thing's got like 7 or 8 jump planes going up and down at the same time. And they would all have different call signs. They'd all be talking to us. But the tricky thing is we're sequencing John Wayne, Long Beach arrivals right through this jump zone. And then we have Ontario departure that also goes right through this jump zone. And so depending on the configurations that day, you're not paying attention. You're not throwing these guys on headings off of the departure, you're going to run people right through the jump zone. And so there's a lot going on. And then you got planes that you're not talking to below. It was a lot to look at. And then there was a lot of frequency congestion on that particular sector, just because there's a lot going on. So busy time, you got VFRs blowing you up, and then you got another 20 to 30 aircraft that you're responsible for, and another 10, 12 jump planes. And it's just like it's just the whole radio would just be people stepping on each other, and you're just like, oh my God, you can lose it pretty quick.
Yeah, it just sounds stressful.
Yeah.
You made it, 11 years? Like, I don't think I could do it. You know, I heard it's a high stress job.
Yeah. I fucking loved it though. I fucking loved it. I actually miss working those busy sessions. You'd be surprised, dude. Like there's people there that like, they get it and they're gamers, and they're like, hey, put me in the fucking busy sector. Like, I'll fucking work it. Put me in the sector where there's weather and like a lot of shit going on. And there's people that just dodge the traffic. We call them traffic dodgers. and they'll like manipulate the brake list so they don't have to work the busy sectors or the hard sectors, and they'll manipulate the brake list so they can like do like, just more of the easy stuff. And yeah, it's fine. I'm like, yeah, go ahead and do that. Like I like working the busy stuff because the time would go by quicker, and it was kind of like it's kind of fun for me.
Challenges yourself too.
It's funny because that's the one part of the job I miss.
Yeah,
you get a certain adrenaline rush when like you like have all these planes coming in as weather, and you're looking at the board and you're just seeing like 20 planes from over here, another 20 planes from over here, and you're seeing a big push. There's weather going on. And you're like, okay, like buckle up. You're gonna get busy, and I fucking love that adrenaline rush. There's nothing like working through it, navigating it. It's like a fucking puzzle.
Yeah.
And then like you get into a rhythm, and you're just like, boom, control instruction. They read it back clean. Next one, control instruction, read it back clean. And that's the best way to control the frequency as a controller. You don't let anyone else talk. You just, as soon as the pilot fucking reads it back, you on to the next control instruction. Then you just got to flow.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
You're in charge.
You take control. Yeah.
Yeah.
When you let all the pilots walk all over you, then you're fucked. And I'm sure you hear that on the pilot side.
Yeah. It's a challenging thing between the two, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes good controllers, we can tell though. If we ask like weather's serious from the pilot side, you're sitting in a seat looking at a thunderstorm that could potentially kill you. And if a controller doesn't get to you, it's like, hey, I'm turning 20 left. That's like in the rule book, right? I don't have to fly through the thunderstorm, but the good guys always get to you. And the other day came on, he goes, hey, don't worry, I'll turn you before the storm. And I'm like, there it is, 30 miles out. But he let me know, hey, I'll get you a turn before that. Don't freak out. And it was great. So good controllers, you can see it on the other side.
For sure. And like a good controller knows, hey, there's a cell up ahead. These guys are needing to deviate. So why don't we just clear that fucking altitude, that flight level, and give everyone a fucking left deviation or south of course approved, when able, proceed direct, whatever. And as long as you don't have anyone else at that flight level, like who gives a fuck, And I think some controllers get it, some don't. But yeah, it was fun. And here's the last thing I'll say about it. I think the reason why you got to take control when it's busy as a controller is because we see what we need to do, right? And so when we give a control instruction to an aircraft, you're listening to the radio and like you're like, okay, that's my call sign. That's for us. But when we have 30 aircraft on frequency and someone calls November whatever, it's like we have to scan 30 just to like figure out who is that, where's the plane, and then they're already talking with like a request, and then process it and then go, right? So it's better. It's easier to take control. You select the aircraft, you give the control instruction, and then just keep flowing. Don't let anyone else talk.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Makes sense?
There's a lot going on that
It's
side,
a lot.
for
It's
sure.
a lot. But I do miss that part. And I have no doubt that I could still jump in there and fucking rip it. I haven't done it in almost 5 years now. No, actually, no. I take that back. This December will be 4 years since I punched out of there.
Cool. It seems
That's
like
actually,
it goes by quick though.
it goes
doesn't
by
it?
quick, yeah.
I was saying, I remember when you were able to leave that job and go for it. And it's awesome to see what you've done.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Of course.
So anyways, man, so you got into flying like 14 years ago. How did you get into flying?
Yeah. So funny enough, my whole family are all pilots. So my dad's an American Airlines pilot. My uncle retired at JetBlue. His son works at JetBlue as a pilot. And my grandpa retired from US Air. And there's flight attendants in the family as well. So
Really?
we just didn't have the money.
It just runs in the blood?
It runs in the blood. So I always wanted to fly, but my dad had me super young at 20 years old. So there wasn't like money when I was 15 or whatever. My dad didn't start making really good money until I was a little bit older, right? Almost out of the house. And so flying is expensive. It's a lot of money, 100 grand, 150 grand to go through flight training to get a job. So I just got started later in life at 26. I was a financial advisor. And I was kind of tired of the commission only job. Like I liked helping people with finance, but I didn't like the bosses screaming down my neck to sell life insurance and stuff. And my dad was always asking me as a bachelor, I lived with 4 guys, and as a bachelor, he'd be like, hey, I'm flying to Hawaii. Can you come house sit and watch my dog or whatever? And I'm like, yeah, cool. I'll go sit in the hot tub by myself, have a date over, whatever. And I loved it. But then one day I said, hey, I'm tired of what I'm doing. Like, you go to Hawaii. How much money do you make? Tell me what your job's like. And that was it. Like he told me, yeah, I drive up to LAX from, Carlsbad, hour and a half, walk onto the airplane, grab a flight plan. I get the airplane ready, fly to Hawaii. And then I go to the gym, go surfing, have cocktails and dinner with the crew. Next day, go surfing again, and then fly back home. And I'm like, you do that 5 times a month and make how much money? And that was it. So I literally 2 weeks notice at my job and started flying.
Damn. And what, you went to like a flight school, or where'd you go?
Yeah. So I went to a flight school at Palomar here in Carlsbad. It took me a while to get that first private rating,
And real quick, because I know as like a new pilot, you really have 2 paths. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Curt. but it's like you can go to like traditional flight school, and get your private pilot's license, and then work on your like instrument, commercial, etc. Or you can go to like the military, right, and like become like a military pilot for one of the branches, right? They all have pilots, right? Whether it's Marine Corps, Air Force, Navy, etc. And you could do what, like minimum 4 years, maybe more.
Yeah, some pilots are 7 years.
7 years.
Yeah, I had a lot of friends
enlisted.
Yeah, and so the way pilots work, most of the time, you go in as an officer with a 4-year degree. So all my friends would go to their 4-year degree, get school, and then go,
As
like
an
you
officer.
said, as an officer.
And what do those guys make?
I think they start at they probably start close to $100,000 now. My buddies were in it a long time ago, so it was like 60,000 when 60,000 was decent. But now you're getting paid $100,000 a year,
And they're training you.
and they're training you, and there's benefits as far as like if you go fly
401k, health insurance.
that and like flight benefits as well, as far as like I guess it's pay benefits. So if you fly heavies or you fly fighter jets, those are kind of the two. So you're flying C-130s or fighter jets. C-130 guys are always going over to Europe, to like Germany, to offload troops or whatever it is. They get like hazard pay if they're near a war zone. So my buddies that were fighter pilots were pushing me to go to the military and do heavy flying. They said it's just you can make way more money
doing that.
Yeah, because I guess the heavy guys, their flight missions are a little bit easier. So you go in.
It sounds a lot more chill too.
Yeah, you go in for an hour, you prep this flight you're doing, and the flight's 6 hours. In a fighter jet, you go prep for 3 or 4 hours.
And do a
You do a 1-hour mission.
Yeah.
And then you do a 2-hour debrief. You only flew 1 hour that day. So as a pilot, you're trying to get flight time. So I actually was too old and didn't have a degree. I didn't get my degree till I was 30. You have to be 30 years old in military flight school for their medical waiver. So I tried to do it, but I missed it by like 1 year. And they said at the time, let's see, it was 2010, 2008, whatever it was, around that time, there wasn't like a war going on that they didn't need pilots. So if they needed it, and it was 2002 and they needed pilots, they would do an age waiver to 35. I just couldn't do it. So the military is an awesome way. I went to the Miramar Air Show last weekend. I was a little bit jealous. There's some cool equipment, had some good combos with military guys. Yeah, or you can go the civilian route, which is really just going to flight school, paying your own way. Sometimes it's longer, and for me it was to come up with the money to pay for it. But yeah, those are pretty much the two most common routes.
Okay. And so how long did it take you to get like your private instrument and commercial rating?
So it took me 2.5 years. You can do it quicker. Guys are doing it in a year now. Number one, I couldn't get a loan, and it was at the time 2008 hit. And so I had a bunch of money in the stock market. Everyone got crushed. So a lot of my savings that was in the stock market doing well got wiped out. So it took me 2.5 years to get through all my ratings till I got my first job.
Okay. And then once you get is it your commercial, then you can become like a flight instructor and start making some money?
Yeah, that's correct. So I got my commercial, and a funny story, I couldn't afford my flight instructor license, which was like another $6,000. So I fell or jumped into ferrying airplanes for brokers all over the country. So people that would, just like a car dealer, they buy and sell cars. Well, airplanes, you got to move them to the airport where the buyer is all over the country. So I literally just transported airplanes to build all my time.
So give me an example, like what kind of planes were you flying while you were transporting?
A lot of for flight schools, so Cessna 152s, which is a 2-seater, Cessna 172s, 182s, Bonanzas. Like doctors typically like to buy Bonanzas. They're a little bit more money. $300,000 airplane, 4 seats. But I mean, I flew airplanes from New York to Carlsbad.
They call the Bonanza the doctor killer.
Yeah, the V-35B.
Why is that?
So in the 70s and 80s, doctors would just buy those airplanes to commute to a hospital or wherever and avoid like LA freeway traffic, let's say. And because they buy the nice airplane for $350,000, and it's a little bit of a handful because it has a lot of horsepower. And doctors, they're really good at doing what they do, but they're not professional pilots. So there were a lot of accidents that did happen. So that's how they got the nickname Doctor Killer.
Yeah. And I think like from my side, when I was working air traffic for 11 years, we did work some of those like doctor type of airplanes, the Bonanzas, the Cirrus SR-22s. And because they don't fly very frequently, they might fly a handful of times a year. They get into the seat and it's like, there's a lot of buttons, a lot of things going on, a lot of checklists. If you're only flying 3 or 4 times a year, it's very hard to be affluent. And I think they're bringing up girlfriends and that sort of thing. So they're trying to impress them. And so the second something goes wrong, I found that they're not reaching out to ATC and saying, hey, I don't know how to do this. Can you guys help me? They're not asking for help. And then they get into some trouble.
Yeah.
Because that's half the battle, right? Like if you're out there and you're like, fuck, like I didn't account for this weather. well, then like just call ATC and be like, yo, like I didn't encounter this weather. Like, can you guys help me? Like, we're happy to help. But if you're like, hey, I don't want to ask for help because I'm trying to like, save face with my date, then that's where people get into some hairy situations. They go into the weather, they get into icing and all that sort of stuff, or they get into IFR situations
Yeah,
and they're not IFR
not rated.
rated, and we know how that ends. It doesn't end very well.
Yeah, I mean, people, flying is a really cool hobby if you have one, but it's not like driving a car. You don't hop in and it comes back to you. It's like if I were to hop in a single engine Bonanza right now, I would hire an instructor or someone familiar with that airplane in the right seat. I may be qualified, but I ain't going to take my family up in that
And
thing,
that's
you
even
know?
you with like you're flying G550s around every day. You've flown Airbus 320s for Alaska Airlines. You're even saying, hey, I would feel most comfortable going up with an instructor in the Bonanza, at least for an
Yeah, I
hour.
mean, I have almost 10,000 hours, but you have to know your limit, and I want to be a safe pilot. So we can go fly a Gulfstream today with my eyes closed, no problem, because I do it all the time, but not a smaller plane that I'm not familiar with. So it's just kind of making the smart decision. And it sounds like a lot of them didn't make the smart decision, you know?
Yeah, and what is that called? They say like the average VFR pilot when they get into instrument or IFR conditions, which would be low visibility situation where you can't see the ground, they get disoriented.
Yep.
And how many seconds is it on average before someone usually
I want to say
becomes disoriented?
it's like 7 or 5. It's like
7
5
or
or
5.
7. Yeah, real quick.
And what is that move? Like people will start like uh they feel like they're losing altitude, and so they pull up, but they're really in a turn,
Yeah, so
right?
like the slip indicator, it'll show you if your airplane's level. You won't feel it. Your brain is telling you that you're turning to the left, and it will happen to me if we went up and flew like that. Your brain would do that. So the trick is to follow the instruments, and that's where the training comes in. But if you don't fly enough, that'll happen, and you can't go back to your training because it's been so long.
Yeah. So a lot of it's keeping the wings level and
Yep,
watching
keeping the wings
your
level,
airspeed.
trusting the instruments and not looking outside, so to keep your brain inside the airplane.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're just looking at the gauges, And nowadays, the newer airplanes like the Cirrus, they're a lot easier. Those autopilots are better. A lot of these Cessna 172s that I flew during training, they didn't have autopilots or any of that stuff. So these newer airplanes are nicer, they're more money, but they have a lot of protections, especially if the Cirrus has a parachute.
Yeah. Tell me about the Cirrus SR-22 parachute, because I worked a lot of Cirruses. Not once did I have a Cirrus in an emergency to where they're like, hey, we're going to pull this chute. I mean, you got to be in a pretty hairy situation, because first you would think logically you probably try to put the plane on the ground, right? Find a nice flat spot to land, whether it's a field, a freeway, some sort of road, even a beach. But like maybe if you're over mountains, you would pull the parachute.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've seen, I have I don't have a lot of Cirrus time, but my friends do. And really, the parachute is a last resort to save lives. So I've seen a lot of guys that end
And
up
you
in
have
trees.
and the plane is in a parachute, or you as the pilot ejects in the air in a
So the
parachute.
plane has one up on the deck. Even their Cirrus new jet, the Vision jet, has a parachute as well. So I mean, you'd have to have an engine failure, right? And so if you can't find a field, I mean, your first thing is in training is find a field, a runway, a dirt field, grass field, put it down. But if you're in the mountains, typically we try and turn away from the mountain or get into a valley. But if they're an inexperienced pilot, or if it's the backup plan, if it's a last resort, I would probably pull a chute if I didn't think I could get to somewhere flat. But with my experience, I'm fairly confident. And when I'm flying along, even like going to, let's say, Lake Havasu, there's some mountains, I'm looking for fields and knowing where I am. I don't let myself kind of get disoriented, or I'm paying attention the whole time because people's lives are in your hands. But it is a very cool feature on that Cirrus, and including the jet.
Yeah. I see you post, and by the way, you post a lot of really good content, aviation content on your Instagram. And I can encourage all the listeners to go check out Curt at the Captain Curt on Instagram. But I see you post sometimes like some incidents that happen, accidents. What is like the number one cause of like a lot of the aircraft accidents that you see out there, especially the fatal ones?
Yeah, and I started doing that. I got a little backlash, like, "Hey, why are you posting some like accident stuff?" I'm like, "Well, this is for pilots to learn. As pilots, we learn from accidents. We read reports, so I think it's good to know, what's going on down there."
You got backlash? Like what kind of backlash?
Yeah, just people say, "Hey, you shouldn't be posting this for likes," and I'm like, "Dude, I don't care about likes. They don't bring money in my bank account for an airplane accident or something. And
But
some of them
those
are
get views though, right? When you post that kind of stuff.
some of them,
Yeah.
some of them do, but it's like, I don't want to just post only accidents because that's not my MO. But if pilots, I have a lot of pilots that look for mentorship from me, and it's like, hey, let's learn from these accidents. So I have a minor in safety, in aviation safety from Embry-Riddle. So we went over a ton of accidents in multiple classes. But yeah, so I think I see a lot of the accidents. There's a lot of accidents happening right now. And with social media, it's more out there. So it's almost like every airplane, multiple airplane crashes every single day right now. There's been some mechanical stuff. There was a family of 5 that crashed. It was at night, single engine, not really over mountains. And I mean, 3 kids and the dad, and they died, you know? So
Lost an engine?
lost an engine low at like 1,200 feet at night, not really near the runway. The dad did a pretty good job. And he's telling ACC, I lost an engine. I'm looking for a place to put it down. He didn't even have time to help. I mean, but between the emergency call and crashing, it was like 20 seconds. So he was looking for a road. He made it to like a Walmart parking lot almost. And they all died. But, yeah, so I obviously I don't post everything about them, but it's like accidents should be known for pilots. There's a lot of like gear down accidents, meaning if a pilot is coming in, shooting an approach, and they have to go missed, you know, which you're familiar with. Well, if it's not a professional pilot and it's a hobby pilot, they'll pull the gear up and they'll go back around, right? The second time, if they're not following the checklist, I've seen it a bunch now, and they land with the gear up because we don't go around a lot. It's not often we go around. And so these private pilots or low-time pilots come around with the gear down. So
because it's not in their checklist to re-put the gear down.
And they're not familiar. Yeah, it is in the checklist. They forget to use it because they do the checklist to come in for the first landing. But then when you hear the ATC says, hey, there's traffic on the runway, go around.
You're like, I don't need to run that checklist.
They are not used to it. Now they're flustered. So they get the go around. They bring the gear up to get the airplane back up to speed. I've been seeing a lot of those lately.
And so that's where ATC, the control tower, they try to incorporate in the scan. Do they do that? I mean, I've never worked in a tower, so I don't know. I was a radar controller.
They don't do the scan. They will. I've heard it before, like, hey, check gear down.
Yeah, but it's not their job.
It's not their job. So if they're busy, like Orange County Airport, like they're real busy with small airplanes and jets and airliners and private jets. It's interesting, you know. I mean, I pay close attention because I want to learn from those things. But it's sad when you see people die for mechanical reasons or whatnot, you know.
It's interesting because you do a little bit of real estate content as well, but your aviation content seems to really get a lot more engagement.
Yeah, it's funny.
Is that what you find?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And it's funny because when I started doing content, I really wanted to do real estate.
Yeah.
That's my passion, right?
Sure.
I love flying, but my passion is real estate and helping people make money. But it's like you have to get something catchy for a hook. And what's hook is like I fly for multiple billionaire clients. That's pretty cool in itself, even though I do it every day and it's kind of normal for me. But for other people, I've noticed like private jets are really interesting and really cool.
I also feel like there's a lot more people. It's a lot more congested a space in terms of a lot more creators putting out content around entrepreneurship, investing, money. And there's a lot fewer people that are putting out good content around private jets.
Yeah, I agree.
You know?
And like for me, as you know, it takes a lot of time. You got to have a team, and I'm kind of building a team now. I was doing a lot of it by myself and then having someone edit it. And now it's like, all right, I need a video guy. I need to run it like a business in a sense, right? Because my time is valuable.
Yeah.
So yeah, the aviation stuff is very, very cool. But it's also like, I'm trying to be different. So one of the video guys is like, hey, just copy what everybody else is putting out there in the aviation space. I'm like, no, that's not me.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a copier.
Yeah, be different.
And I don't need the views. But it's bringing real estate investors too. So pilots are investing with me. And so that's kind of my angle now, like 75% aviation. And a lot of it is not just pilot training, because I get a lot of messages from pilots saying, hey, can you help me? I got this many hours. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. I'll give you some advice, but I only got so many hours in a day for that kind of stuff. You know, I got to work on the business. But yeah, the aviation content is very fun. I'm trying to focus a lot more on getting as much widespread aviation content as I can. I don't want to put out, hey, how do you go get your license? I want to put out more like, hey, this is how much this private jet costs to rent to do a trip. Like if you want to go to Nashville with your whole staff, like I want to do a video on that. How much would it cost to go from San Diego to Nashville on a private jet that seats 8 people? That's interesting to most people, even if they can afford it or not. And I mean, private jets are expensive, you know?
Hey guys, real quick, the only way the show grows, the only way we continue to bring on bigger and better guests is if you guys rate, review, and share the show. So if you could take 2 seconds or the click of the thumb to review on Apple or Spotify, it will mean the world to me. But more importantly, we'll be able to reach more entrepreneurs and more real estate investors and help them build wealth through this podcast. Now back to the show.
Yeah, well, that's actually a good exercise. So let's run through that here later on in this podcast. I definitely want to run through that. What I was going to say is this. The other cool thing about the aviation stuff that you're doing versus like, oh, let me teach you how to fly, is like, this is appealing to the majority of people. Most people know what a private jet is. They think it's unique, it's different, and so they want to see. And so I think it's definitely going to get eyeballs. For whatever reason, people love airplanes and they love boats. I didn't know this, but it was like one of the reasons I got the boat was like I had a feeling, I didn't know for sure until I did it, but I had a feeling it would get more views with like social media content. And so far, every time I've incorporated the boat in my content, it's gotten a lot more views than had I not. And so I don't know what it is about boats and planes, but people just like them.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't know if it's like unattainable or it's their goal. I mean, a boat and an airplane's my goal too, right? Like
Yeah.
I love watching all your boat content.
Thank you.
And it's different too.
Yeah.
But it's also something like I was telling you before, like I'm shopping for a boat. So I get to like kind of see like, oh, Rich has got, that's a good sized boat. It flows like this. So I love seeing all that content as well. So it's not just, I think you have a wide base of people that would love to have a boat and an airplane, whether it's a small plane or a jet.
Yes.
You know, it's just a goal for anybody.
Yeah, it's attainable.
Yeah, attainable
Yeah.
and entertaining. You know, your boat content's entertaining. I love it.
Yeah. So then let's run through that exercise. So let's just say that I want to have a bachelor party in Miami, and I live here in San Diego. I want to take 8 of my boys out to Miami for a weekend. We want to rent a private jet. What is that going to run us?
So pretty much what you do is you figure out, okay, how many people? So we got 8 people that want to go to Miami. So now we need a jet that will go into Miami nonstop. I mean, you don't want to stop for gas, right? So now you're looking at a mid-size to a full-size or a large
we're going nonstop.
Yeah, you're going
not
nonstop.
Not renting a private jet to fucking refuel in Omaha, Nebraska.
Yeah,
Fuck
exactly.
that.
Yeah. So now you're looking at like a Challenger 350 or a Gulfstream 5 or something like that. So the second question as a broker, since I sell some of these flights, would be like how many days you're going to go for, because that does account for the cost.
Okay. Let's say we're going to fly in on a Thursday and we're going to come back on Sunday.
So
3
that's
nights.
like a 4-day trip. It's probably about a 4.5-hour flight in a Gulfstream or a Challenger. They're pretty similar. I would come to you and say, hey, the Challenger 350 sits 9 people. So it's totally doable. It's legal. It's fairly comfy. Or do you guys want to ball out and have like a 14-passenger jet where you got way more room with some couches you could kind of take a nap on if you wanted? You could stand up in the cabin, where the Challenger is the mid-level.
Yeah, let's go Challenger, and let's just assume, hey, we're gonna do this. We're gonna bring 8 people, but we're not gonna spend more than we need to.
Sure. So that's perfect. So 8 people Challenger out of San Diego, Miami, probably about a 5-hour flight. They typically go for $7,000 an hour, and that's fully with a flight attendant as well. So $7,000 an hour times 5 hours, $35,000 for the way there. They'll charge you. The way back would be about the same price. It's 30 minutes more. So let's say it's like $7,000 for the way back. They'll only charge you just a little bit in parking fees, because it's a 4-day trip. Usually charter minimums are about 2 hours a day. So 8 hours over 4 days, it'll meet their minimum, but they'll just charge you some parking fees, which will be around, Miami's not bad. Gas is cheap there, but it's around like $1,000 a day to park, let's say. So you're looking at like $75,000, 70 all in, and on a Challenger.
Okay, $70K all in. That's 8 people. And then what does the pilot typically make for something like that? Because they're getting compensated, and you got a crew, right? You got a flight attendant typically for a nice
and that's
like
up
that?
to the client.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, the client.
Yeah, so you could say,
the client
hey,
pays for the pilot to be there.
Kind of know what I mean. It was for the flight attendant. So if you're like, hey, we don't need a flight attendant, we're good. We'll bring our own
we want a
booze.
flight attendant.
Yeah, you want a flight
Yeah,
attendant
yeah.
for something like that,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
So that's all included in the package price. So these companies have pilots that fly those airplanes on full salary. So it doesn't really, there's no extra on there. Those pilots of a Challenger typically make about $200,000 per year on salary on a Challenger 350.
Got it. Okay. And okay, and then there's tip involved, right?
And that's only, it's not mandatory. It's not like expected.
But I want to take care of the crew.
Yeah, if you want
And
them
so
to
what does that
remember
run?
you, probably $500.
Okay, that's it.
Like
$500.
Yeah, like if we get
On
$200,
$70K, on $75K.
Yeah, I mean, so it's up to you. That's what's kind of, there's no tradition with tipping in private jets.
So let's say $2,500 tip.
Sure,
Okay. So now we're looking at $77.5, and then is there sales tax on top of that?
that would be all included. But yeah, there is sales tax in there, but that's pretty much all included.
The sales tax would be included.
Yeah,
with
the way the
$77.5.
charter. So what they do is the charter, when they send you a quote, when you say, "Hey, I want to go to Miami. Here's my quote," they give you, this is the all-in price. They don't try and nickel and dime you like the airlines do a little bit.
Okay. So $77.5. Now, if I want to do something like Cabo, 2-hour flight, we're gonna shave a lot off of that. However, we get the minimum.
Yep. So you have the minimum. So
Let's say
what they'll
Cabo.
do,
Let's
yep.
size up Cabo.
So Cabo, I mean, you're a 2-hour flight,
Okay.
right? That's a lot. Yeah. They'll charge you 2 hours on the way down. On the way back, I don't know if you can do San Diego, but you might have to go to Brown Field for customs. I don't know if they'll let you do the airline customs here. So then you might have another 15 minutes. So it's about 4.5 hours for a Cabo trip. But 4 days, yeah, you have a minimum. So what I like to do is negotiate on my client's behalf. You know, if I have a relationship with this person that has a Challenger 350, like I do in Carlsbad, I'll be like, hey, this is my good buddy. Like, give him a deal where they might charge you 1 hour on the day that you don't fly. So now you're looking at like $6,000, you know, or whatever. So, I mean, you do the math. Let's see, 2.5. Call it 5-hour trip for that. Like, I could probably make that happen.
Okay.
You know, $35,000 for 8 people going. It's not like unattainable.
35 G's for the
You
weekend.
know?
Okay. Yeah.
And it's expensive, but now if you go, let's say if you were like, hey, it's a closer trip though, we can go in a smaller jet. We can actually take a Citation jet that will seat 8 adults. It might be a little cramped,
Oh, I see what you're
but
saying.
we could go do that for $25,000.
And you said it's a Citation 10?
Yeah, no, like a Citation, they have those.
Yeah.
Smaller Citations.
That's a
typically-
Citation 750, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Those
So
things,
I mean,
those
that's
things, those things,
mid-size.
those things climb like rocket ships.
Yeah. So I bet you we could get you one of those for like 30,000. And if you wanted to go to like a CJ2 or a CJ3, those are also single pilot. So you can also save some fees there.
A CJ2 is a single
They're
pilot?
single
I
pilot
had no
airplane.
idea.
So there's lots
It's a big
of
ass airplane to be
It
single pilot.
is.
Dude, I got a membership with SetJet earlier this year, like around January. And I flew them one time to Scottsdale and back, and like a week later they went out of business.
Yeah, I remember seeing them. I actually wanted to sign up just to get the experience because it's pretty cool to go to Scottsdale for like $900.
It wasn't bad at all. $900 to Scottsdale, $900 on the way back. On the way there, like 3 or 4 passengers on the way back. The stewardess was like, "Hey, you and your date are the only 2 on the entire plane." And so we had this like really nice, I think it was a CJ2, all to ourselves. I'm like, this is pretty nice for $1,800 all in.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not
that's
bad.
pretty great.
And I remember saying to myself, I'm like, I don't know how they're making money.
Yeah,
But I'm gonna continue flying them. It was like $99 a month. I was like, I'm gonna continue flying them until they go out of business. And then sure enough, like literally 4 days later, I get an email from them and I say, hey, thank you for your business. But due to some unfortunate circumstances financially and in the capital markets, we're going to be shutting down doors effective immediately. And I'm like, fuck.
Yeah.
That was it.
it's just you know, a lot of people go, hey, I want to buy a jet as an investment and make money with it. You just don't. Charter companies will tell you that. Hey, buy a jet. It's good. You can make money chartering it out. Sure, it's kind of like a boat. You can offset some costs. You can get your hangar paid for, maybe the pilot's paid for, so you reduce your costs. You are not making profits. You know, they say, hey, do you want to know how to make $1 million in the aviation business? Start with 2. That's how you make $1 million. So you're just losing 50%, you know?
What do you mean when you say start with
So
2?
if somebody says, yeah, like, hey, if you want to have $1 million in aviation,
Okay.
there's no way to really make it. So start with 2. That'll bring you back down to 1. That's just how aviation does. And boats are similar. You can charter them out. You know, some people might make a profit, like your buddy Dave Champagne, but overall, if you had a nice yacht, you know, you're not really making profits. You're just offsetting the dock costs, insurance, the cleaning, the crew. Like that's what a lot of owners are, at least in aviation.
Yeah. I agree with that. I do know a handful of people personally that have private jets. Some podcast guests have come on, like Grant Cardone, Dan Martell, Chris Crone, and then my mentor in the multifamily side, Tony Azar, who kind of helped me like get into the commercial real estate game, taught me how to raise money, put these deals together. He has 2. He has the LJ Learjet 40, and he has another one, but he does the in-service thing, and he says when the economy was really good, like a good year, they would break even. But he said most years they take a bath.
Yeah, I think during COVID, the aviation business went crazy, right? I was working a lot. Everybody was requesting jets. They didn't want to sit on airliners. That was probably the time to be profitable if you owned a jet. But if not, you broke even. That's a good year. Now it's down like 50% right now. There's just not a lot of charter demand. Some people they're still flying, but people aren't spending money like they used to. They're starting to tighten up.
Dude, for me, man, if I have the choice, I'm like, okay, buy a nice boat, or the jet, and I can only do one of the 2. I would buy the boat 365 days out of the year personally, because for me, I have no problem sitting in first class and just like going into the airport terminal, waiting a little bit, waiting in security and waiting in line to get on a flight. But first class to me is still like really comfortable. And I would rather put that money towards a nice boat and just be on the water. I don't know. That's me. Now, I'm not everyone. A lot of people love the private jet thing, the PJ, but I'm like, I'd rather be on the water. Like that's time that I'm spent. I go to Catalina. I'm out there for 4 or 5 days and nights on the boat. A lot of memories. I can bring people out on the boat, entertain. It's not a really huge cost of fuel to go out into like the island and do different things. But now you start talking the private jet. That's a whole nother ballgame. Now, my boat is not comparable to a private jet. You might have to compare like a 100-foot yacht to a private jet if you want to like talk apples for apples. But I would argue, at least for me, I would still pick the 100-foot yacht.
Yeah.
Personally.
I think I would too. The people that have jets that I fly for, I mean, they're going to business or vacation. So like you said, you could fly first class to that meeting. You might just have to leave earlier, right? We can land and they're in their meeting in 10 minutes, depending how far it is from the airport. But it's a time machine. And I would rather have a boat too for enjoyment. You can still have business meetings on boats. And like you said, you would use it more. So when people, they don't go hang out in the airplane. Like we don't hang out in the jet. I get the jet ready for them. They show up. Boom, we blast off. Literally family vacations or business deals. That's it. That's the two uses. Where a boat, there's so many more uses for it, and you get enjoyment. I don't think these people get enjoyment out of their jet. It's a tool. It's their car. It's literally their Uber. I tell people I'm an Uber driver for billionaires, and I am. It's just a high paid Uber up front,
Yeah. What is the most affordable option for someone maybe listening to this or someone out there that as a business owner, maybe they start to get a little taste of what it's like to make some good money and they want to buy like an entry level jet or maybe even like a nice turboprop? What is like the best bang for your buck plane that someone new to the private flying club or private, what would you call it? Private jet?
Yeah, it's private jet ownership,
Okay.
you could say.
Yeah. So someone that wants to get an entry level plane, best bang for their buck, but they don't want to go spend $30 million on a private jet. What plane out there is going to give them the best bang for their buck?
Yeah, you really have to ask them like, hey, what are your normal flights that you want to take? Is it from LA to Miami? Now you're in a bigger jet range that you need to spend. You don't have to spend the 30 million, but you need a bigger jet. Maybe it's older, right? And now you're looking at a Gulfstream 4 you can pick up for $4 million, but the maintenance is a lot of money because it's older. Or something small where like let's say hey, I only fly like 2 hours, or I fly San Diego to Vegas and Phoenix, Scottsdale. Now you can look at a turboprop. Like the Piaggio from Italy is a very fast 400 knot turboprop.
400 knots?
That goes as fast as jets, like as
Whoa.
CJs, as you know.
So tell me about the Piaggio.
So the Piaggio, you can pick one up for like 2 to 3 million used in really good shape. It's a twin turboprop. The funny thing about it, it looks a little funny when I first saw it. The props are in the back, which actually makes for a quieter cabin.
Really?
So it's not as noisy where like a King Air, the props are in the middle, almost to the front of the plane. So it's louder in a King Air as you're sitting in the back for the client. But the King Air is a lot slower. You're doing like 260, 270 knots compared to 400 in a Piaggio. So I got to go fly with one with my buddy Owen. He flies a couple of them for guys. It's 8 passenger seats in the back and very roomy. So if you saw one, it's got a little wing on the front for aerodynamics on the nose.
What's that all about?
I guess it's for aerodynamics. It needs the lift. So because the props are in the back, I'm assuming it would just lift off. I think the front wing keeps it down, keeps the nose down. I'm not an engineer and expert, but that's my assumption on it. But that's a little Italian rocket.
How many people can you fit in that thing?
So it has 2 seats up front and 8 seats in the back.
Okay.
So if you really needed to, you could fit 10.
And what about range?
Range on that's like 3 hours. So San Diego to Dallas, that's good range from, if you wanted to go to Florida, you could do one stop. But that's an airplane you can go get. It doesn't need a type rating for a pilot. So it's under 12,000 pounds. So that's kind of nice. So you'd only need one pilot. And you can take a bunch of people. And like I said, you can enter into that thing for $2 to $3 million.
Yeah, that's not bad at all. And how high altitude wise is that thing cruise?
That one will cruise at 41,000 feet.
Wow.
Which a King Air, I think, is like 31.
So this thing cruises just as high or higher and can outrun a lot of these smaller, lower end jets, right?
Yeah.
Like the Citation 56X.
Yep.
What else can it outrun?
Yeah, it'll outrun any small Citation. It'll outrun Hawkers. Hawkers won't go that fast. Any Phenom 100, 300, they'll outrun that. The Cirrus Vision Jet, guys are starting to buy that. I don't like them that much personally. They're real small inside. They got a single engine, and they only go to 31,000. So as you know, like most of the weather is in that 31,000 range.
And Honda Jet's kind of similar to the Cirrus Jet, right?
Yeah, it is. They have 2 engines. I see a lot of accidents with those. I don't know why they're running off runways a lot. I think they have brake issues. You know, Honda makes really good cars. I don't know about jets,
Yeah.
you know, so
They
I
gotta
haven't
stay in
flown
their
one.
lane.
Yeah, stay in the lane. I haven't flown one, so I can't talk bad about them, but I see a lot of them run off runways, so.
So with the Piaggio being a turboprop, can it get into shorter runways than like these other jets can?
Yeah, that's correct, and it'll burn less fuel. They'll burn about 70 gallons an hour, and right now, depending where you buy fuel, if it's $6 a gallon, that's like, you know, call it rounded up $500 an hour. Like, we can afford to go fly that, no problem. Not that much money.
And so because it can land in like shorter runways and take off in shorter runways, you can go to more remote areas that maybe you can't get to in a standard jet?
Yeah, that's correct. So if you had like a larger jet, like a G550 or 650, we need so much runway. They do pretty well, but a turboprop, you can go into a runway that's like 3,000 feet. Santa Monica, for example, not many jets can get in there because it's a really short runway. They shortened it years ago. So when you go in there, you'll see PC-12, which is a single-engine turboprop, King Airs. But if you had a meeting, I have some clients in San Diego that go up there for meetings in LA. They fly up. They just charter a turboprop to get in there and not do the 3-hour drive.
I've never flown in a private jet, but I've flown in the set jet, which was like the CRJ2, and then that was like what would you call that? Shared?
Shared. Fractional. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And then the other thing I did was one of our bridge lenders flew us from Seattle to Manson Bay to go tour a property they were selling us. They ended up selling us this hotel up north, and they flew us in it was a turboprop. I forget the name of it, but you sit in it, and this turboprop is like a twin turboprop, and you feel like you're in a private jet. Like, it looks and feels interior-wise, it felt all the same, and I was like, damn, this is pretty cool. Yeah. So anyways, I guess my last question is, because it's a turboprop, this Piaggio, is the cost to maintain much less or much cheaper than what it would be with a standard jet?
Yeah, overall, I mean, to replace a turboprop engine is only a couple $100,000, where most jet engines are $500,000 minimum is like the cheapest jet engine to replace. So overall maintenance and wear and tear on the airplane is much less. The thing weighs less, so the landing gear doesn't need as much maintenance, things like that. Yeah, turboprops are they're great starter airplanes, and some of them people never go into a jet if they're not flying that far. They're very reliable. That's a big ticket thing too. So,
And this is manufactured out of where?
that's out of Italy. So
Okay.
they call it the Ferrari of the skies because that's where Ferrari is made.
I love that, dude. That's cool. And you were an Alaska pilot for a while.
I was, yeah.
Tell me about why you transitioned from Alaska Airlines pilot to like private.
Yeah, so I was flying for Virgin America in 2014. Very fun company, great culture. Richard Branson, you know, a lot of people know him. He really wants people to enjoy the customer service as well as enjoy working there. So I really enjoyed working there. Alaska bought Virgin America, and the culture changed a lot. My routes changed. So Virgin America, I was flying to Cancun, Cabo, and Hawaii. Those are all my layovers. I brought, you know, my mom came on a trip, my sister. We just had fun. It was like almost mini vacations, right? Well, when Alaska bought us, they said, hey, the Airbuses are just going to Seattle and Portland. And so there was no more good trips. And then eventually they said, hey, we are going to sell all the Airbuses. We want to run a single fleet of Boeings. And for me, I was like, wow, I don't want to just fly. A Boeing's a small airplane, the 737. It's just small in the cockpit. They're real loud. They're not comfortable, in my opinion, as a pilot. Where the Airbus is a very comfortable airplane. So during COVID, we weren't flying much at Alaska, and nobody was flying, right? The airlines weren't going. So I had a friend call me and say, hey, I got a Gulfstream 4. If you get typed on it, you want some work? And I said, now's the time. This would be a great idea. So I went and got myself a type rating, and then pretty much just took over on his airplane as a captain because I had the qualifications at the time. And then realized, like, wow, I really like going to Cabo flying Gulfstreams for rich people. And it's progressed since then. I've moved up in aircraft, and I've used kind of my personality and my customer service skills. It's a customer service job. You know, you got to be a good pilot, but it's how you deal with the clients. So I just kind of leveled myself up to flying for the big guys that I'm flying for now.
So give me an example. What's a typical trip look like for you flying private for some of these billionaire clients?
Yeah, I mean, like last month, we went to Tahiti. The billionaire client's like, hey, have you been to Tahiti? I said, yeah, I've done it several times. And he was leaning on me for like advice. So yeah, we left in LA. We flew from Ontario Airport with a nice long runway, and we flew all the way to Tahiti. He wanted to go to Bora Bora. So when you fly 8.5 hours in a G5 to Tahiti, you land, you clear customs, and it only takes about 10 minutes because you're on a private jet. They come right over, customs comes to you, grabs your passports, looks at you, and they clear you. And then we take a 30-minute hop over to Bora Bora. So that's a pretty fun trip. And that time he was going for like 10 days, so I airlined home, which is a little bit of a pain, but at the same time, it's, you do what the client says. But a lot of times we stay over there. So I think he's going to Fiji this month or next month, and I'll be looking forward to staying in Fiji. But it's not always that way, right? Sometimes we're going to Pittsburgh. I just did a 4-day trip to Dallas. So Carlsbad to Dallas, sat for 3 days, and then flew home on Sunday. They went to college football game where his daughter went to school. Had some great barbecue. Most of the time when I'm there, I'm doing real estate calls and working on the business or getting more jet clients. So the trips, they're all different. And that's what I think I really like about it. And I don't fly for one individual. That's what makes me different. I'm literally an entrepreneur pilot. I fly for several different clients. And if I don't like a client, I can move on to the next one, so.
So I know Grant Cardone has a G6, a Gulfstream G650 right now. But before that, he had a G550. Tell me all about the G550. You've flown this for years now, right?
Yeah, so I've been flying the G550 for years. It's a great airplane. You can pick them up now for about $20 million. Those were the top airplane 10 or 12 years ago before the 650 came out. We can fly 13 hours on that airplane. So the range is pretty far. Grant lives in Miami, so he can be in the Middle East or London or Europe like really quickly, right? The 550, it's got a big wing. So we can actually get into some pretty small runways with that thing. The approach speed is very slow. So I love flying it. It seats, they can seat anywhere from 12 to 16 people, and it all depends on
16 people.
16.
It's that big?
Yeah, it's that big. And it all depends on what the client or the owner, how they like it set up. I've been in them where they have 12 seats, no couches, just a bunch of nice big seats. So it kind of depends on the client. Some have 2 couches that fold out into beds, like in a back room that they could close the door. So I fly several of those airplanes. So it kind of depends. Like, if you had a G550 and you're flying to Europe all the time, well, you're going to want to go back there and sleep. So you're going to shop for one that has couches that come into beds.
Yeah. What's the range on these things?
Those are about 5,500 miles. You can almost get 6,000 out of them.
Okay. So if you go San Diego to Europe, you're going to stop in like East Coast somewhere.
Not in a 550. We'll go all the way to Europe.
Really?
So we can make it. We can go to Italy. We can go direct from LA. So you got to look at the performance with the fuel. So San Diego Airport, I've never done it out of there, but like LAX, Ontario, Long Beach, they all have bigger runways.
How big's the runway LAX?
LAX is like 13,000 feet.
Yeah. San Diego is like 10,000, right?
I don't even know. It's been a while. I think it's more like 8.
Because they
It's been a
got
while.
direct flights out of San Diego to like Germany on Munich.
Well, then it must be long enough. It's been a while
Okay.
since I've been out at San Diego.
Yeah, no, they do Tokyo, Japan Air.
Okay.
Air Swiss used to do direct to Zurich.
Okay. Then it's
And
probably.
then Speedbird comes in here with a 747 once a day, and they go direct to San Diego to London Heathrow.
London. Yeah.
So it's got to be long
So
enough.
it's got to be long
right?
enough.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So you could go San Diego in a 550, no problem. Anywhere in Europe, pretty much. Yeah, 13 hours. Like Italy's probably about as far as you can go. You can't make it all the way to Tel Aviv. 650 is probably pretty close to make it all the way to Tel Aviv. Those things can do 16 hours.
So what is that plane run? Because that's a plane that, if one day that would be the plane that I would want to get. Something where you can like literally go anywhere in the world.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, if you're a baller, you're flying a G650. Like Grant upgraded from a 550 to a 650. I think he bought his new and it was like 55 million.
He said it's slightly used.
Slightly used. So now the prices have come down because G700s came out now, and those are 80 million. So, but you can pick up 650s now. Maybe they're 8 or 10 years old. But about, 25, 30 million, but they go up. You might go find one that's 2 years old for 45 million. But the range on them is 16 hours. So you can travel the world in those things.
That's interesting, man. Definitely it makes you realize there's levels to the game. You know what I mean? Yeah. So you do a little bit of real estate stuff. I know you went in and partnered with Blake Daly on the 130 unit hotel out in Tennessee. How's that project going?
Yeah, it's going pretty good. We're getting a better nightly rate than we projected, which is a great thing. So right now we have a $3 million renovation going. As you know, the renovations are a lot of work. There's a lot of moving parts. So it's going well. We're delayed. We had a USDA loan is what we refied into after using a bridge loan to close. That extended 4 months past what they told us. So it cost us a lot of extra money. the
with
deal's
the
going.
bridge financing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So it delayed it. So I mean, I think that cost us 150 grand in fees of holding the loan longer. Now it's like we have a good rate at 8.5%, which is pretty good on a long-term loan. But yeah, right now doing a $3 million renovation. Should be done about January. We're releasing a bunch of rooms like as we speak. So as soon as that thing starts running, it's a really cool property. In the Smoky Mountains, I had never been out there. I went out and toured the hotel in January and fell in love with the area. So super excited about that one.
That's cool. I know they just had Hotel Con out there not too long ago. And I know a lot of people, I know people in my hotel community were out there as well. About 100 folks. You didn't go out there for
Yeah,
that?
no, you know what? I was planning on it, and you know what happened? I mean, they had my ticket, my room all booked, and
Really?
a new client out of Carlsbad, where I live, called and said, "Hey, can you fly me to Dallas this weekend?" And I had to weigh the options, and I had to tell Blake, like, and a couple of your buddies too, and I'm like, man, I'm not going to make it because this is more important for my family. Like, yeah, I can go shoot the shit and have a fun time, but in the end of the day, I still got mortgages to pay, and so I took a job instead that is probably going to lead to some really good things.
Yeah. You still doing the Airbnb thing? I know you had one in Havasu.
So I don't really anymore. I own that house still. I sold the other ones. I think the market's just coming down unless you're in a really, like, your Scottsdale property's rad. Mine's an average, but I love Lake Havasu for myself. So I literally rent to friends. I really don't rent on Airbnb anymore. But I use it as it's a second home. I still use it as a write-off, and we don't get out there as much, but I'll keep that one because I like the house, and I bought it just so well. I can move to rent it full time and still profit like $1,000 a month on
That's
full
good.
time.
That's
So
good.
it's one of those that I won't ever sell.
Yeah.
But I won't see myself buying any more
Yeah.
STRs.
And are you still doing like the fourplex flipping out in Houston?
No, so yeah, kind of like a lot of investors, if you're motivated, it's like I started with flips, got fourplexes, and then sold those. I bought 2 mobile home parks that I'm actually just signed yesterday to sell. Those are kind of a pain in my butt too. I'll make a good profit, but I'm trying now.
Why are you selling those?
They're too much work.
What do you mean when you say that? Like, give me an example.
It's too many emails. So the bummer is the parks that I bought them on seller finance, great deals. They cash flow $6,000 a month, but they're so small that no management company wants to manage them. So I'm managing them from a distance using a tenant that's in the trailer, and they're tough. So unless you have 100 units in a mobile home park, it's just not. You got to be on site, or
Because the property manager won't touch it.
they won't touch them. You probably have to have like 75 units. Now, when you get into 100, 150 or more, now you're competing with the big hedge funds and Brandon Turner and all those guys. So although the mobile home parks might be good, I've just shifted asset classes,
And so where are you playing now?
So now I'm doing developing in commercial industrial buildings. I've been studying it for a year, and we got 2 deals right now in Houston because we're familiar with the market.
You and Chad?
Yep, Chad.
Yeah.
Yep. And we got a bunch of investors and things like that. And they go up so fast. You can build them in 8 months, they go up. So we're just literally building warehouses that have divider walls that you subdivide into like 2,000 foot. So they're called flex space, small bay industrial. We're renting to businesses. You're not renting to, nobody lives there. So the rules are a little bit different. They got 3% rent increases every year that are built into leases, and they're triple net. So our expenses are 7% a month, and really, like, we won't get phone calls. So that's where I'll probably be for quite a while. And I feel like we're a little bit ahead of the curve. People are building these, but there's not really much social media on it. So I think we're ahead of the curve, and the returns are really looking good.
That's pretty cool. And I know you've done a lot of private financing, short-term debt and that sort of thing. Are you still doing a lot of that?
No, so I got out of that as well. It was a really cool thing. And what happened to me was I was sitting on cash from selling some assets and flips and whatnot, and I was done flipping. I was done being on the phone 40 times a day, right? And you can do that if you build a team. And it was like, I didn't really want to do it. You're dealing with short-term capital gains on every flip. There's no way out of that. And I didn't want to be doing all the work and giving the government 40%. You have to own the property and hold it. So that's why we got out of flipping. But yeah, we started lending a bunch of money. It was going well for a while, and then until the market turned. So we got a couple lawsuits for some big money that we're still getting back. And yeah, like I'm foreclosing right now as we speak on a 88-unit apartment complex in Arkansas, but they owe me $1.1 million.
And you were in first trustee position?
Second. So a lot of the stuff we do is in second.
Yeah.
We'll get it back, and we're dealing with like the first lender about taking over the loan and assuming. So it's just a little bit of a headache. What I realized was I want to control my money, and I don't want if other people control it, I have no control. So that money that's out right now, I've got like 1.6 million that I'm trying to collect. I could be doing a lot more deals with that thing if I had the money. So I won't do any more loans. I thought about getting into the loan business like full time, but I want to be simple, right? I read a book, Psychology of Money.
Yeah, what it say?
It was super good. And what it said was your needle will always move. Figure out what you want your life to look like and then work backwards. And so my life, I wanted to be on a boat with family and friends, not getting 50 phone calls a day and not chasing like maybe $100 million target. So I said, let's be at a happy target where it's a nice amount of money and I'm not stressed out, So it changed my philosophy a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, you're at a stage you got 2 kids now.
Yeah.
Congrats, by the way, on the second
Hey,
kid.
thanks so much.
And I get it. I mean, it's at a certain point, it's like, what more do you need, right? And there's always another level. There's always another gear, and there's always another like path for the person to become a better version or whatever it is. But at what point do you just say, hey, you know what, this is enough, and I'm comfortable with this?
Yeah, and that's something I'm going through. And something else is funny is I was always like reading or taught like, hey, use leverage to scale more and scale more and scale more. And this book actually says like, okay, but at what point do you want to like have no debt and pay your house off or whatever? And I own 2 houses with debt or whatever besides the investments. And so one of my goals now is to pay those off. I'm not going to do it tomorrow, but I'm like maybe 10% of every deal I sell is going to go towards that debt. So whether I pass away unexpectedly, it does happen, right? I don't want to leave my family with a bunch of debt and whatnot. I want them to be safe and secure. So it's interesting as you develop as an entrepreneur, we're always growing, right? I never thought I would say, hey, I can't wait to pay off my mortgage.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But at the same time, it's like, well, what kind of life could I have if I don't have debt besides mortgage, but if I had zero, like what could you live off? I mean, I wouldn't want to live cheap because we work pretty hard and we like nice things, but man, you could do it off pretty little money if you had no debt at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, dude, I appreciate you coming down, taking the time to hang out, talk shop, and drop all the knowledge in the aviation space. And big fan of everything you're doing, dude. Appreciate everything you're doing, man. I've always been a fan. Excited to see where you go next. And where can the folks get in touch with you, brother?
Yeah, thanks. Mostly Instagram at the Captain Curt. Just launched a YouTube, starting to launch some very cool aviation videos on there. But yeah, the Captain Curt on YouTube as well.
I'm gonna have to check you out,
Yeah.
Captain Curt. Okay.
Launching a good video today or tomorrow. I'm gonna launch a really cool where I chartered a Phenom,
Really?
a jet, and I'm
Sick.
excited because I hired a professional film crew for that one.
Sick.
So I mean, I think the video is gonna pop.
Where did you guys
cool.
fly?
We did Carlsbad to Las Vegas for lunch, but it was just a video to, hey, here's the feel. Like I'm usually up front, but I rode in the back with a business friend and go, hey, this is what it's like flying private. So I'm trying to do some cool stuff like that for people.
I like that. And we're gonna go shoot. Hopefully next week or two. What are we gonna shoot?
So hopefully it's a Global 6000 that my buddy Mike is in charge of. So he's the boss of the airplane, So yeah, he said we could come shoot some videos and show people what it's like, and that's a very nice jet.
I love it. Well, there it is. Listeners, go check him out on Instagram and on YouTube. He's Captain Curt Marker. I'm Rich Summers. Listeners, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.